of people who they say are dying by suicide. It's really important that we do our part in terms of teaching young people how to manage and deal with stress and cope with disappointment, learn how to manage bullying. We have to be the people who do this. And because we're the adults in the room. We don't want the trend to increase. We want to do everything in our power to decrease this trend and to provide the help. I keep on saying about this, and to provide the help that our young people need. So that's why we're here today. I also want to say to you, you will find in your swag bag a brochure, and this is on intergenerational trauma. Well, why is this important? First of all, trauma is coded on your DNA. So if you go through some traumatic event, then it's coded on your DNA. And then when you have children, it's coded on the RNA. And that's why it's important where the Bible says the iniquity of the father is going down to the third and fourth generation, but God showing mercy upon thousands of them who love him. So it's not that we can't overcome this. It's just that we need to know how to overcome. Research has shown that once you families complete counseling, then it's no longer on their DNA. So there is a way out. We also know that through Christ, he takes care of everything. So intergenerational trauma is passed down through the DNA and also behaviorally. So the way that goes is, so your mother or father, let's say your mother was raped, and she becomes fearful and hypervigilant. So she passes that fear behaviorally down to her children by being overly protective, by being suspicious of everyone, lack of trusting anyone. So that's a survival thing for her, but it has nothing to do with the children. But the young children may respond by either becoming fearful or rebellious because she's being too harsh on them, or the children themselves may end up becoming getting raped because he has not given them those strategies that you get for your regular social skills to prevent yourself from getting harmed. So intergenerational trauma is very important. And so in here we have the ACEs test. So when you get home, you can read through this. And if you can say yes to 4 or more of these, that's an indication that you need to do an intervention for yourself. Now, whether that intervention is through counseling or if that intervention is through self-help materials, then whatever it takes. But we don't want to continue to pass on intergenerational trauma to our children. What this means to us as African Americans is that it's very important because we went through slavery and then Reconstruction, then Jim Crow laws, and we continue to go through microaggressions daily. So not only are we suffering from intergenerational trauma, we also have racial trauma that we bring against, in addition to your regular stuff that you have. So I want to encourage you that if you know someone who may have been traumatized, if you yourself have been traumatized, take care of yourself. Take care. Your life is passing. You only get one life. And so with that, we're going to introduce you to.
Before you do.
I'm going to introduce you to our speaker today. Our speaker's name is Angela Tate, and she was a former chief operating officer of the behavioral health response. Now, behavioral health response, we used to call 911 for the behavioral health. If someone was dying by suicide or you believe they were going to try to, harm themselves, then you would call 911. Well, now we're calling 988. Get that in your head. So if someone says, I want to die by suicide, you dial 988, because then what they would do is send someone out to assess the situation. Don't you try to do it. You don't have to do that. You don't have to say, oh, he's just talking. You can dial 988. It sends a person a message. I'm not going to play with this. This is not something to play with. And then they have to take account of what they are doing. And if they need the help and they believe they need the help, they take them to the ER. So she was the chief operating officer for that. She is a licensed professional counselor in private practice. She's been working in the behavioral health arena for more than 20 years. So she comes with a lot of professional expertise. And then currently she is an associate pastor at the Westside Missionary Baptist Church. And her greatest passion, her greatest desire is to see people healed through the grace and power of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So we're going to ask Angela to come forward and she can get us started today. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. It's my pleasure to be here. So I am going to do my best to make technology do what technology is supposed to do. All right, here is my presentation. So today we're going to talk about birds, bees, and suicide. Let me see. So I might need a little support because when I start my live presentation, then I'm not able to. Oh, I can't get. Okay, I'm good. I'm good. To share my screen so that Miss Evelyn can see my slides as well. All right, perfect. You can see good. All right, wonderful. So, birds, bees, and suicide is what we're going to talk about on today. So, Mended Pieces, you'll see that logo on each of my slides. This is an organization that I started. It's my private practice. And really the gist of it is that we know that life's experiences can leave us broken. But through Christ's love, the gifts he gives us, the grace he extends to us, that can help us to mend the broken pieces back together. So Mended Pieces is an organization that exists to help in this journey towards wholeness. We accomplish this through therapeutic support to individuals, couples, to families, leaders, and organizations through counseling, training, consulting. Focus areas include mental health, suicide prevention and intervention, leadership principles and development, spirituality, and Christian living. And so the suicide intervention and prevention is just one part of Mended Pieces, but we also do individual counseling, family counseling, and the like. But the idea is that the brokenness that we experience in life, our love can help put those pieces back together. So because we're going to be spending quite a bit of time together today, I think it's only fair that you know who I am, because I'm certainly going to ask who you are. And so this is just a little bit about me and who I am. I am the associate pastor at Westside Missionary Baptist Church. I've been a member of Westside since I was 16 years old. But I've been associate pastor for the past 4 going on 5 years. I am a therapist. I'm licensed in the state of Michigan. So I do individual counseling, family, couples, anything again to help people journey towards wholeness. I am a wife and a mother, and a sister and a daughter and a Nina. That little one that's standing in front of us, that is my almost 7-year-old granddaughter. She calls me Nina. She's the only one that matters. don't tell my husband. My husband and I have been married for 26 years, and we have 2 beautiful young adult daughters, a soon-to-be son-in-law as soon as they set a date. And so I love my family, and they mean everything to me. The picture of me with the Believe shirt on and the medals. So I am a marathon runner, and I set a God-sized goal to run 50 full marathons before my 50th birthday. I turned 50 October 7th. I finished my 50th marathon in April of this year. I'm very, very proud of that accomplishment, but it is only because of God that we were able to do that. So that's a little bit about who I am. I will also add, Ms. Lakita mentioned the ACEs survey. If you haven't had a chance to see that survey or to take it, I encourage you to do so. So I am a 6 on the ACEs survey. And what that means is that before I was 18 years old, I was exposed to 6 out of 10 adverse childhood experiences. And the statistics say that I am supposed to be incarcerated, uneducated, sedentary lifestyle, involved in a domestic violence type situation because of my 6. But as you see here, none of those things are my story. But I am not ashamed of my 6 and I don't run from it. In fact, I have leaned into it. I have done my work through there so that my young adult daughters, when they took the ACEs survey, they were a 0, right?
Yes.
And so wholeness is possible, no matter what. When you encounter me, you encounter my 6. But my 6 does not stop me from being able to do any of the things that the Lord has determined would happen in my life. So I put that out there again, that is a part of this is who I am. So Birds and the Bees. I don't know if you all are familiar with the song, but the lyrics say, let me tell you about the birds and the bees and the flowers and the tree. Come on, somebody know it. And the moon up above and a thing called love. Let me tell you about the stars in the sky and the girl and the guy and the way they could kiss on a night like this. When I look into your big brown eyes, it's so very plain to see that it's time you learn about the facts of life, starting from A to Z. So this idea of birds and bees and suicide, we've got to talk about it. All of us who have children, at some point in your children's lives, you had to talk to them about the birds and the bees. I remember talking about it to my daughters. My sister was pregnant, and the girls kept saying, what's that in Auntie Erin's stomach? It's a baby. And the questions kept coming. How did the baby get in there? And I wasn't quite ready to have that conversation with my girls. They just kept asking. And the bigger she got, it was like, this is not going away. And so one day we were in the car, they both are in the back seat and I'm driving. And I took a deep breath and I said, okay, let's talk about it. And I told them about where babies come from. Told them all of the things. I'll spare y'all the details. Y'all know it anyway. And so I'm telling them this story, and they are both, well, my oldest daughter is old enough to realize that what I'm explaining to her happened with her mother and father. The youngest is just by nature curious. So I'm saying all of the things to them, but I'm not looking at them. So at some point I pull down the mirror so I can catch a glimpse of them.
Right.
My oldest daughter is horrified. And my youngest daughter has this look of curiosity on her face, like, tell me more. But sometimes it's like that when we're dealing with suicide. It's the thing we know we need to talk about, but something's stopping us from talking about it. And so I'm praying that today we break through some of those barriers, right? And so as we talk through the things that we talk about, here's some things I want you to keep in mind. And if you even like to share where you are on any of these we go through, we're gonna go through about 10 of these. Please stop me and say, hey, I'd like to say something about that. I welcome the interaction. But what I want to say to you about your attitudes about suicide, they belong to you. My job is not to change your attitude about suicide. Your attitude about suicide is whatever it is. But you have to be aware of what your attitudes are and how and when to minimize them if they could create a problem for keeping someone who's having thoughts of suicide safe, or how to play them up if it keeps them safe. And so be aware of your beliefs, acknowledge your values and your attitudes and your opinions. Respect any differences that may exist, be non-judgmental, but please be aware that your attitudes about suicide can make the difference between someone staying alive and someone completing suicide. So I want you to look at these statements and either just think for yourself, or like I said, you are welcome to share what you believe about these statements. I'm gonna come to you in just a second. So I want you to think about these statements running across a spectrum and having an agree in or disagree. You might be far on the agree in. You might be far on the disagree in. You might be somewhere in the middle. But I want you to also think about what makes me agree with this statement. What makes me disagree with this statement? What makes me kind of be on the fence? Because all of this is raising your awareness about your own attitudes, so that when you encounter someone else and they're having thoughts of suicide and they have attitudes about suicide as well, you can determine, okay, do I need to play mine down or do I need to play it up? So, my young lady in the back, what was your thought? Talk to me about that. What do you think about that? You agree or disagree with that statement? Okay.
In the school district, I see in the second grade, and working in the prison, older, look, as old as 21.
Amen. And so, that particular statement, anyone can be at risk for suicide. She said, I agree with that. Is there anyone who disagrees with that? And it's okay, this is a non-judgmental zone. Anybody disagree with that statement? Was there ever a time that you would have disagreed with that statement?
Yes, definitely.
Come on, tell me something.
I would never think that children, elementary school age, would have any reason to think about suicide except being exposed to it from some adult. I would have never thought a child would consider that.
Okay. I'm gonna share, I have several personal stories about suicide. I'm gonna share one that relates to that statement. Anyone can be at risk of suicide. Growing up, and y'all, I already told you how old I am, so y'all know what generation I'm a part of. Growing up, I was taught Black folks don't suicide. That's White folks. And when you're a kid, when your parents say stuff to you, you believe them. So I believe Black folks don't suicide. Black folks don't have thoughts of suicide. My best friend, who is Black, had suicidal thoughts. She engaged in suicide behavior, cutting, things like that. She was taught the same thing. Black folks don't suicide. And so in our child minds, we reason, well, you must not be Black. Black folks don't suicide, right? And so the danger of that, what is my word? The danger of that teaching, that's not my word, but left my friend in a space where we couldn't talk to anybody about this because Black folks don't do this. And so she was left in a spot where she was consistently unsafe. Because I can't tell anybody I'm having thoughts of suicide because Black folks don't do this. Now, praise God, she did not die by suicide. She is actually in the field herself. She is a, what is her title? She's a doctor, a doctor of psychology. And so she and I both went into the field so that we can make sure folks know Black folks do suicide, right? anybody else ever been taught that Black folks don't suicide? Yeah, so there was a point in your life that you would have seen that statement, anyone can be at risk for suicide, and you would have said, oh no, I disagree. Good Christians, do good Christians die by suicide? Huh? You say no?
And that would be the premise, that they don't.
That they don't, but
They do,
come on, right?
yes.
And so, and you all see the other statements, I won't read those out to you. But again, think about where you fall on the spectrum of any of these statements. And so if I am a person who believes that anyone can be at risk for suicide, if that's my attitude, then I need to pay attention to the folks who typically we say are not at risk of suicide. Because I need to make sure there's an open door for them to come on and talk to me. If I disagree with this, then that might make me someone that's not safe to come and talk to, because I believe, oh, what you're not having thoughts of suicide. What do you mean? We don't do that, right? So we have to be very careful. Any thoughts about any of these other segments, and then I'm going to show you 5 more. Please, sir.
I was passing out some of the flyers. I was in the hospital, met a lady. And I told her I wanted to invite her to this suicide prevention. She said, oh, no, I don't want nothing to do with that. Let them people go. They want to do it, just get them out of there.
Oh, nice.
So their attitude, it was remarkable to me, the attitude that she had towards suicidal people.
Yeah. It still surprises me that attitude lingers, but it's there. And think about it. Somebody who's had thoughts of suicide may have encountered her, and she made some statements, and she didn't even realize that instantly she created a space that wasn't safe for me. Right? Please, ma'am.
That's why when I read the third statement, there are many what I can do.
Let's talk about it.
Trying to commit suicide. And she called me, at 2 in the morning, and I was like, okay, what do I do? So I kept talking to her. And then I told her, I said, you are gonna call 911. I said, if you don't, I will. But, I took I came today because I didn't want to say the wrong things. And I knew when I grew up, what people would say to people that would say, they'd be like, oh, get over yourself. You need. And then I came from a community where they would tell me, go get you a drink, you'll be all right, forget about it. But I don't really, I don't have that background, but I never, I don't ever want to give advice other than I'll call 911 for you, but while she was in the hospital, I told her, I said, well, and I said, my church has a grief line, I said, but I really don't know what to say to a person. And like I agree with the lady back here. Even after I got my principal degree, they had us going through these classes where the teens come to you. And the thing we were taught as educators, you send them to the counselor. I mean, you just write them a pass, send them through the counselor. And sometimes those kids, they didn't connect with the counselors. They was like, they was like, they had their favorite teacher. So, what happens when your favorite teacher said, I gotta go pick my kids up from the daycare, and it's not her fault. And she like, I'll talk to you tomorrow. But tomorrow may be too late for someone.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I'm coming to you, sir. There are limits to what I will do to prevent suicide. We have to know where we are on that spectrum, because where I am on that spectrum might be very different if I'm dealing with one of my clients in the office versus if it's one of my children. If it's a family member or a friend or a church member, there might be limits if it puts me at risk, right? And so we do have to have an idea of what are my limits? How much am I qualified to do? And I'm gonna say this right now, you do not have to have a degree to keep someone safe from suicide, right? And so I'm praying we'll walk away today with a little more confidence that, yeah, I can do my part, and my part is this. And when I reach that point, this is what I can do to pull in the next person, right? Because sometimes it's not for us to do the whole thing, but for us to do our part. It's just like if God forbid, one of y'all fell out on the floor right now for foaming at the mouth. And y'all better laugh at my jokes today. Somebody's gonna do CPR, or somebody got a cut. Somebody's gonna do first aid. But we can't stitch nobody. So we're gonna get them to the people who can give stitches, or we're gonna get them to the people who can run an EKG. It's the same thing. I'm gonna do what I can to keep you safe until I can get you to the people who can take it from there. So you did the absolute right thing. You answered the call, that's first of all, because honey, my phone goes on do not disturb at 11 o'clock every night. But you answered the 2 a.m. call. You made sure that if you don't call 911, I am, because the key is safe. And so we're gonna talk a whole lot more about that. Thank you though for sharing, please.
One says anyone can be at risk of suicide.
Uh-huh.
You know, two brothers, one was on heroin, one was on cocaine. The drugs got switched. One brother died of overdose. And meaning to commit suicide, but he did not deal with that.
Yeah. And I don't think I get into it in this particular presentation, but when we talk about how suicides are reported, I do have some suicides that Mr. Peter shared some as well. Suicides are always underreported, and part of it is accidental overdoses, because they get reported as an accident, and some of them are accidents, some of them are suicides. Single car accidents, some of those are suicides, right? So suicides are always underreported. I'm gonna go to the next slide with just some other statements. Persons who think about suicide also have reasons for living. People serious about suicide cannot be helped. That kind of goes back to what this gentleman was sharing about the lady saying they should just go ahead and do it. I'm hopeful my community can work together to prevent suicides. I failed if a person I'm helping with suicides, and I'll be ashamed if someone I am close to suicides. Any thoughts about any of those? Please.
My daughter has a stepdaughter. But in reality, she really isn't. Her mother passed away, she's like 8 years old. So now she's 15. Mother never told her who her dad was. She went to her grandmother. Grandmother told her she doesn't believe it. This job has been herself in the whole life. So we were to call her grandmother. Look at her and now just a one-time phone and not taking a shower since. This child, she's a loving person. And I don't know why the family for much spent don't want to do the situation at all. And I knew when they started with everything, well, what can you do? You're not related. And you don't see each other much. But now she's entering like a foster home now. So I know she's got a family, but she's not who her father is. And I don't understand.
You know, and it's tough because suicide is not always, a person who's having thoughts about suicide, it's not always about death. It's not necessarily that I want to die, but I'm in such psychological turmoil, in such emotional pain. I just want the pain to stop. And in the absence of connectedness, we'll talk about that coming up, mattering, right? You matter to somebody. And I'm going to continue to find ways to try to avoid that pain, to mask that pain. And here's one of the other things. So I do a 2-day suicide intervention training. And so I keep thinking about things from that training that I didn't put in here, but I'll still share. I do put in here somewhere where we talk about sometimes folks will say, people who say, I'm thinking about killing myself or having thoughts of suicide, they'll say, oh, they're just trying to get attention. And so my philosophy has always been, okay, we're gonna give them some. Because that need for attention says there is a need that's going unmet. Let's do what we can to meet that need. That is not a negative thing to desire attention. And so if that person is sending up signals that something's missing here, we would do well to respond to that need. It's kind of like, things are so different now, but when you get your electric bill, right? There's a need. You pay this bill. You ignore that invitation. And so what do? Well, they send you a different invitation first before they cut it, right? They send you a yellow invitation.
A pink.
And then the pink one, right? When you get that pink one, it's supposed to be lights out.
Ooh-wee.
And so they keep sending up more serious invitations, hoping that you're gonna catch it. And sometimes that's what happens with our young people. They're sending us invitations. They're unlovely invitations, right? We might get cursed out, we might get disrespected, whatever the thing is. Those are invitations that there is a need that needs to be met. And each time we miss it, okay, let me send a more serious one. And so that's why intervention is so important. And it's not even always about preventing suicide in that moment, right? Like I took the gun from you, I took the pills. Sometimes it's just about connectedness. There is an adult in particular. There is an adult in my life that's not family. Oftentimes it's the people that's not family that I matter to. So my suggestion, I don't know the whole situation, but if there are ways that your daughter can continue to make it clear that that young lady matters to her, that's something. It's not the whole picture, but it's something, right? Miss Evelyn wants to know if it's possible that people in the room can have a mic. She can't hear what people out there are saying. So Miss Evelyn, what I'll do, I'll try to repeat what they're saying. If you can hear what I'm saying, put that in the chat. And I'll try to do a better job of making sure I repeat what they said so you can. Okay, so this is what we're going to try to cover today. I just want to talk some general mental health 101. I won't spend a lot of time on that unless you all have questions. We can talk about it. I will share some suicide facts, statistics to add to what Ms. Lakita shared. We're going to talk about assessment. How do I assess someone who's having thoughts of suicide? How do I intervene, including talking about safety planning? And I want to also make sure we talk some about self-care. I never do a presentation without talking self-care. So let's talk mental health 101. So just as some level setting, this is the working definition that I use for what a mental illness is. It is not a weakness. It is not a moral failure. It is not a lack of faith. It is not the person not praying enough. It's not something that people can snap out of, and people are not doing it for attention. A mental illness is a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, their ability to relate to others, and their daily functioning. So sometimes the reason that we have trouble seeing a mental illness as a medical condition is that the traditional so-called medical conditions disrupts our body. It disrupts our kidneys, or disrupts our lungs. It disrupts that function. Well, a mental illness still disrupts, but it's disrupting our thinking and our feeling and our mood. But it is a medical condition. I need us to hear that, because for too often we've treated mental illness as if it is a moral failure, or that people didn't have enough faith, which is why I love being able to have a foot in both camps, so to speak. I'm an ordained preacher of the gospel. One of my spiritual gifts is intercession. I believe in the healing power of Jesus.
Amen.
But I also know that sometimes the way God answers our prayers is through a really good therapist, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And so my work as a therapist is not in opposition to God's work or his healing. He's actually using me in his healing virtue. And so we have to be so careful that we don't push people away and make them believe that because they have a mental illness that it is a moral failure. Just to cover a few diagnoses, mood disorders, these are things like depression, bipolar. So this is more than feeling blue. We all kind of feel down. But depression is I'm having that low mood and other symptoms that go along with that for at least 2 weeks. And it interferes with my day-to-day activities. So sometimes I might be down, but I can still push through and get myself done. You know, if I have diagnosable depression, if I have bipolar disorder, it's gonna interfere with me being able to get my day-to-day stuff done. Bipolar disorder in the last few years has become very pop culture. You see it a lot, you hear about it a lot. I always encourage people that to let folks know bipolar is more than just a mood swing. My kids would come home from school sometimes and say, "Oh, Miss such and such, she's bipolar." And why do you say that? She was happy this morning, and by the end of the day, she was mad. That's not bipolar. Because if that's the case, all of us, right? And so, I just always like to put that out there. Anxiety disorders is another category of mental health diagnoses. So this is where things like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Anybody watch the show Monk? Right, and so that's a Hollywood version of OCD, PTSD, any kind of phobias, eating disorders, or an anxiety disorder. And let me say this is not what we're talking about today, but another diagnosis that I grew up hearing, that's the white folks, is eating disorders. There are so many of us in the African American community that's struggling with disordered eating. It is not even funny. But we've pushed it that it's the other folks. And so this is one, especially with our young girls, we've got to watch out for. They may not be bulimic or anorexic, but sometimes our young girls will punish themselves by restricting their food, or they'll over-exercise. So have your eye out for this one as well, but it is an anxiety disorder. Anxiety is the most common diagnosis, and it's really our body and our brain preparing to respond to risk. So heartbeat will speed up, this adrenaline pumps into your bloodstream, tense up. So this is fight, flight, or freeze. I saw a huge spike in anxiety around COVID and the quarantine, and this is through the roof among our college students. Less common diagnoses, things like schizophrenia. So this is the least common diagnosis, but it's the one you see portrayed on TV the most. So you think if someone has a mental illness, they got schizophrenia, if you pay attention to what's on TV. But the symptoms are, but they have voices, delusions, hallucinations. Addictions, we include that here as well. And addiction is a medical condition. So important that we hear that, because often we will treat addictions, even if we can wrap our minds around that mental illness is a medical condition, we will still treat addiction like it's a moral failure. That snap out of it, you just need willpower. So what happens with addictions? You drink that drink, you smoke that smoke, you shoot that dope, whatever you do. Your brain says, oh, yeah, I like that. Not only do I like it, now I need it. The brain gets altered because most folks experiment with drugs, alcohol, when they're teenagers. The brain ain't fully formed yet. And so we don't know why this one smoked and nothing happened, but this one did and they were instantly hooked. Because the brain is still doing what the brain is going to do, but it is also a medical condition. And so I like to put that out there. The thing that all of these have in common is that they are all treatable and people can live productive lives even with these diagnoses. Any thoughts, questions about any of that, please?
So you just opened up something. And you talked about addictions being a mental illness. So there are a lot of societal things that instantly comes to my mind, because I would dare to say that 90% of us are addicted to our phones in some way, shape, or form.
Come on.
If you don't have your phone, there's some type of anxiety that's gonna come up. People don't realize it, but it is.
Yeah.
And I just, one day I just took a little study. I was looking at people. Everywhere I went, everybody was on their, in the restaurants, it didn't matter. They were on their phone. So this is an epidemic
It is.
throughout society.
Yeah.
And we talk about when I was coming up in the 70s, we didn't have these young people killing themselves. I had a couple of friends in high school, white friends that you know, they were just strung out and killed themselves. But on the whole, you didn't see the suicide as much as it is now. And I believe because of social media, people are you know, being taught how to think. They have to be affirmed on how they look, how they dress. If they don't, then there's something other than, you know, fear is perpetrated everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you up to a point. I do know that suicide numbers are on the rise. But I believe it's always been here. Just because we didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't there, right? And part of why we see it so much is because of social media. But even before social media, the 24/7 news cycle, right? I'm old enough to remember when TV went off, right? Midnight hit, they played the national anthem, and then the color bars come up. And then the next thing, 6 in the morning, is the Lone Ranger, right? But we started being hungrier and hungrier and thirstier for information. And so here comes the 24/7 news cycle. And here comes all of these cable stations. And some of what we are experiencing is the consequences of excess. Right? So I agree with you, but I do also want us to acknowledge it's been here. And because if somebody suicided in the Black community, it didn't get reported as that. We didn't talk about it. So you might have thought Uncle Johnny just passed away in his sleep. He shot himself and nobody told you, right? So, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. Please, Mary.
Yeah, you made a comment that you said all of these things are treatable. But you know, when I grew up, and the last set of twins, my sister, when my mother went and got her some help, she said, you know, she's not where you and your brother are, and she got her some help, and it was like the whole community was like, oh my God, she mentally, I mean, they would see her in the store, we'd be walking with her and she's like, I took my medicine, but it was such a stereotype that nobody, and even the church, they was like, oh Lord, please don't let your sister come to church with you. And I'm like, well, where's she gonna go? If I'm going to church, she wanna go with me. And I'm younger than her, and I'm like, I'm taking my sister, and to this day, she still talks to me in Indiana, she'll say, you know, even at the family reunions, they still act funny, they, oh, that's the one on that medication. And but my thing of it is, it was such a stereotype that those people, you just kept them at home in the house, and my mother said, no, I'm gonna get.
Lock them in the room. Don't open that room because Uncle Johnny in there.
And don't take her out to the grocery store. I mean, she can shop for herself and stuff. And I do have relatives that will call me and say, you need to call your sister because she done cussed out everybody and she done locked them out. And she told me, I don't want you visiting me. And then when I talk to her, she'll tell me this is what they did. And I'm like, see, they don't admit to what they're doing, but some things trigger her. But I do know during COVID, she probably was one of the healthiest people because she never let nobody in the house, in her heart. But it's just the stereotyping that people can do. You don't want to, and I'm like, give her a chance. She's still a human being and she still can function.
And so for those online, we had a couple of comments, one just about suicide seems to be much more prevalent and social media is playing a role in it. And then also, as we talked about, all of these things are treatable. Just how the stereotypes, the stigma, that's the word we use quite a bit, is the stigma that's associated with mental illness. And when we say that word stigma, it's really a euphemism for discrimination. We discriminate against people who have a diagnosis or a mental illness and things like that. And it's not a part of this particular presentation, but we do have to be mindful of how we talk about mental illness. And I'm not gonna ask you to out yourself, but we have all been guilty of, oh yeah, his elevator don't go all the way to the top. Or this such and such, she needs to be on medicine, or all of those things that we say. And if I'm in the room and I know I'm on medication, well, I won't be saying nothing about that, right? And I might be doing good on my medication, but I know this space is not safe now for me to say anything. Or if I've got a family member that's going through something, I can't talk about it with them, right? So yes, please.
It seems to me like the discrimination comes not just because someone's on medication, but if they even seek counseling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you know that somebody has to talk to a counselor.
Yeah.
That stigma already starts.
Help seeking behavior, which should be applauded, but it's not. And here is what's so wild about it. One of my, so for those who are online, we're talking about that sometimes help seeking behavior, getting help, is what's stigmatized. One of the people who I look up to in the field, her name is Marsha Linehan, and she is the founder of what's called dialectical behavior therapy. She talks about she herself having a bipolar diagnosis, but getting the help she needed and becoming whole and going into the field. Now she is a giant in the field. I mean, a giant. And she talks about for at least the first half of her career, she would not talk about the fact that she was living in recovery from bipolar disorder because of this stigma. And here she is, she's a white woman, right? So she's got that privilege. She is advanced degree, so PhD, that privilege. And even with that, she's like, nope, because they gonna discriminate. So if this one who has all of the privilege, what about our folks that are poor and uneducated and with this diagnosis? So stigma, discrimination is real, right? Please.
Williams, I have a sister that I lost her husband. the son, then 4 months after. She's been in this big depression. They put her on medication. Her pastor told her, of course, that medicine down. She did, and now, when I asked her, I was taking medication. She gets a anger. She won't discuss it. So I know she's not taking medication. But for her pastor telling me, I just didn't want to believe it. But that's how close she is to her pastor. Being there.
So, so the question on the floor, the comment is about, a family member who had compound loss. Lost 2 family members close to one another, got some help, was prescribed medication, was taking it, was doing well on the medication. But in conversation with her pastor said, nope, don't take that medication. She flushed it, didn't take it, and so, is now declining.
And she repeats herself.
Yeah.
He says it to, and she'll say, 2 minutes later, she'll repeat, coming back to.
So she's in a state of decline, and I won't say that all of that is related to not taking the medication, but certainly that's having some impact. The grief in and of itself is enough to create that kind of decline as well. So I'll say this, I will never speak against a man or woman of God. I will say, some clergy have not been trained in this area. It does not mean that they have to be professionally trained to understand, but there has to be an openness to understand that the Lord can heal in a lot of different ways. We would never tell someone who was taking medication for a kidney problem or heart problem or whatever to not take their medication. But because we see mental illness differently, then it gets demonized. And so that makes me really sad. And so my encouragement would be for her to seek counseling, grief counseling in particular. And so sometimes it is, we might know this person needs medication, but they're not there yet. But will you at least do this much? Let's take the path of least resistance, because she needs some support. But oftentimes it's because clergy may not be there where they're ready to accept that the Lord can move like this and the Lord can move like this. We look close enough at our Bibles, we'll see Jesus himself didn't heal the same way each time. So, yes, ma'am.
With I don't know, you hear that with children, that they're so eager to say that they're ADHD, ADD, and then want to give them all this medication. Is that part of a willingness not to take your child to be diagnosed?
So, and so the question on the floor is about just kind of the prevalence of ADHD as a diagnosis and the medication that comes along with that, and what do we do with that? I would say, because I do agree that there is a boom of that particular diagnosis. Kiddos on the spectrum, there's a boom of that particular diagnosis and the medicine that goes along with it. We are our children's best advocates. And so what I see sometimes in parents is an all or nothing approach. We get fearful about the diagnosis and we get fearful of the stigma. I don't want to be the one that has something wrong with my kid. And so we're not doing nothing. Well, let's not ignore what we see with our eyes. And I can advocate, okay, what is the non-medication intervention? Let's try that first, but let's do something. In my private practice, I am not, pro medication. So I don't push medication. I always say, hey, let's try talk therapy first. Let's see how this goes. And then if I'm seeing, okay, we're not seeing enough change, then I make a recommendation, hey, you might want to explore medication. I always have people start with their primary care physician. I don't jump straight to psychiatrists, because at the primary care physician level, that's going to be the lowest dosage. That's going to be something that can be managed on a different level than when you're hitting psychiatrists. That's a much more significant, severe, right? And so let's try the things that's not medication first, but let's do something. And oftentimes I'll see parents opt to do nothing. And some of that is the stigma and the shame and the embarrassment that comes along with having something wrong with my child when there's nothing wrong with my child, right? Please.
Oh, when it comes to medication, we never look at other alternatives, like natural herbs, but we also never look at possession.
Say some more about possession.
Like if it's demonic or if it's some sort of spirit that, you know, we are housed in this human body, but we are spiritual spirits. And so that's like a taboo to even look at.
So I agree and I don't, because I think sometimes we overly demonize people who have mental illness. We immediately want to lay hands and cast out demons. I believe that sometimes that's necessary. I am a member of a Baptist church that doesn't typically do that, but my particular church, we believe in laying hands. We believe in casting out demons. But what happens again is a situation of all or nothing. There isn't I'm gonna go to herbs and homeopathic cures, and if that doesn't work, then I'm gonna try something different. I'm just gonna stay over there, and if it doesn't work, I'm pretending that it does. Or we're gonna go to the demonization of this and only do that. I am cautioning against any of those extremes. If we wanna start with more homeopathic, natural medications, let's start there. But if that's not getting it, then let's do something else. And every mental illness is not a demon.
Well, speaking on different ways, yes, it's so that we're not pro-medicine, we don't take medicine, we always go to the diet.
For sure.
And stuff like that. I'm just saying that's not even being looked at. As far as some people just go straight to medication.
Some.
So
Yeah.
it is population or other alternatives other than medicine. I'm not
Yes.
saying yes.
No,
I'm not saying
absolutely.
just be all for them because it is a trial and error. Oh, they're not, the herbs are not working. If the environment, if the juice and the food that you're taking, if we're not cleansing our bodies with the levels, then, we look at that first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
Like you have different other avenues.
for sure.
Not to just, okay, this herbal is not working.
Yeah.
Because the things is not all of them are the same.
Correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. You try what works. And so if it is diet, let's do that. So that's just like people who you go to the doctor and you get you're pre-diabetic. They're not gonna immediately put you on medication. They're gonna say, go change your diet first, exercise some, then let's see, right? So yeah, let's throw the kitchen sink at it. I just always caution over one extreme to the next, but I'm in agreement with you there. Yes, ma'am.
So based on what she's saying, is the treatment always a hit or miss, or is there ever any testing done to see whether it's an organic brain disorder versus something else going on?
Outstanding question. So yes, if a diagnosis comes, then we're testing all of the things to make sure this is what it is. So for example, if I'm working with someone and they are showing symptoms of diagnosable depression. And when I say that, I mean they meet the criteria according to the DSM. This isn't just, I'm feeling down for a little while. Based on my diagnostic manual, you have depression. Well, I'm not going to jump to medication. I'm going to say, go and have, when was your last checkup? It's been 2 years since your last checkup. Go have a checkup, get your blood drawn. Chances are you might have a vitamin D deficiency, or you need an iron deficiency that's mimicking depression, but it's not. Because a mental illness is a medical condition, let's check everything, right? All right, I'm gonna keep going. Please keep asking questions. If we don't get to something in my presentation, I'm good with that because you are asking what you need. And I would prefer that you get what you need, versus me just trying to get through my stuff. The mental health continuum. So we often talk about people who have a mental illness as if they are those people over there. They're disconnected from us versus them. But I love looking at this along a continuum because this is all of us together. So when we talk about mental health, this is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, they can cope with the typical stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and able to make a contribution to his or her community. So when we talk mental health, we understand that we are on a continuum from healthy to ill. And so at any given point in time, I might shift from this healthy place, depending on what's going on in my life, and find myself in an injured place or ill place. And just like I can go that way on the continuum, I might be able to go back the other way. I could be ill and find myself in a place of healthiness. So I always like to show this. And one of the things that helped us to, pull back the covers on this continuum that we are all, this is all of us, was the pandemic, right? Because some of those of us who are typically healthy having to be quarantined, oh my goodness, that reveals some things. Now, for me, it was like, man, I've been training my whole life for this. I am an extreme introvert. I just want to be in the house. I could be a professional hermit if someone would pay me to do it. But for someone else, that could be tough. So it kind of unveiled this, like, we all have some moments of anxiety. We all have some moments of depression. And there was lots of help-seeking behavior during the pandemic. I believe, just even from a private practice standpoint, I am still encountering the residue of what the pandemic did to us. Wow. So, thoughts, questions about the continuum? All right, and Mr. Peter, please keep me honest on time because I will go until forever. Perfect, okay. So let me just share a few facts, suicide facts. Over 44,000 die by suicide every year. There are over 1 million lost survivors each year. So a lost survivor, this is a family member, friend that's left behind by a person's suicide. You could keep breaking these numbers down. Over 123 people die by suicide each day. Over 1.3 million attempt suicide each year. It's the 10th leading cause of death for all age groups, the second leading cause of death for our young people. 10 million adults think about suicide each year, right? So suicide thoughts and suicide actions are two very different things. there's a number of people who have had thoughts of suicide, but who have never taken any kind of, never engaged in any suicide. 1.2 million, plan a method, and one death, by suicide exposes 115 people. That number is not an exact number, because you think about, suicide deaths like, Robin Williams. And so we're all exposed to that, we're all impacted by that. And lots of other, suicides, that we encounter. When we talk about the language of suicide, we talk about stigma. This is some of the, stigmatizing language that we sometimes hear. The language committed suicide, that was common language at one point. When you think about that word committed, we usually associate that with crime. And so, when we commit suicide, it leads to the criminalization, of suicide. And these are people who are struggling. You think about, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And if you do a Google search for breast cancer survivors, they're always portrayed as warriors and strong and fighting, and they are. But when you look up, you do a Google search on, people fighting depression, you always see them portrayed holding their head, and they're weak, and man, they're fighting a battle like nobody's business on a day-to-day basis just to stay alive. And so, we want to decriminalize suicide, so we're careful. So that's why you hear me say die by suicide, suicided, versus committed suicide. Failed attempt, right? There's nothing successful about suicide. So you will go, I have the, preferred terminology in the next page, but, I don't think I have this one, but, completed is a term you'll hear, completed suicide. I'm not high on that one either, but it's better than, a successful attempt. So you see, all of these are terms that, promote, stigma. And so just to share some, if I want to say, hey, don't say these things, here are the things that are better to say: die by suicide, suicidal, self-directed violence, interrupted suicide attempt or suicide attempt, non-suicidal self-directed violence. That is, the term that we used to use for that is, self-mutilation, cutting. So sometimes you'll also see, self-injurious behavior. I'm not trying to suicide, but I'm engaging in this self-directed violence. Thoughts, questions, comments about any of that? All right, when we talk about, please, oh, yes, ma'am.
No, I just, trying to wrap my head around the cutting.
Okay.
How does that help?
What does that do? Yeah, so the question is, how does, cutting self-injurious behavior, how does that help? So, you ever, stub your toe, and to get over the pain of that, you try to think of something else. You try to point that pain elsewhere to make you stop thinking about that. With self-injurious behavior, I'm in such deep psychological pain. I've got to feel something different, right? So the cutting, and the subsequent bleeding helps to draw my attention away from this psychological pain. And sometimes it's also, I'm so numbed out by this psychological pain. I'm in such despair. I don't even know if I am still real, am I even still here? And the cutting can bring back to life. So the cutting, sometimes kids will pick and even pick a patch out of their head. They'll scratch, take erasers, right? All of these different things. But the aim is to distract from this very intense psychological pain that you can't get to. If we stub our toe or we hurt our knee, I can grab that, I can rub it and feel that pain is getting better. I can't get to this psychological pain. I gotta distract.
It's a justifying of pain or a decompression. That's what a couple of young ladies explained to me. They needed to decompress. They needed to let out or justify why they were hurting.
Yeah.
So they would. Like
a pressure cooker.
Yes.
Yeah. It's too much pressure built up. I gotta let some out or that thing gonna pop off. Good question. Other questions? Okay, so you see all of these that are on this list, at-risk populations. Now, some of you may see yourself on this list. There may be some, well, there are some men in the room, you're on the list. Anybody dealing with chronic pain or illness, you might be in the room. You might be former military and be on this list. It doesn't automatically mean you're at risk, but these are just some of the folks who can be at risk. And based on what we talked about earlier, anybody could be at risk, right? So I don't want us to get caught up on just, okay, we're only looking at these for these people. We're looking at everybody, really. Thoughts, questions? All right, so let's talk assessment. How do I start to get at that this person that I'm dealing with is having thoughts of suicide? We simply ask the question: are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you having thoughts of suicide? Anybody uncomfortable with that question? You think you could ask that if you needed to? Okay, good. That's not always the case. I'll share my personal story. When I got my start in mental health at BHR, I started on the front lines. I was a phone clinician, taking crisis calls. And at this point, I am degreed, have my master's degree in counseling, have been through all of the training, right? I'm a whole professional. The first time I had to ask somebody, are you thinking about suicide? I was scared to death, right? And so that's me being trained, and it was my job to ask. So it wasn't even like I'm just asking you something off the cuff. I'm supposed to ask, scared to death. And so this can sometimes be an uncomfortable question. And so we acknowledge that in this room. If it's not uncomfortable for you all, I applaud you. And tell me, why isn't this uncomfortable? Or when it was uncomfortable, what made it uncomfortable, please?
Well, you know, I think for me to ask that question, especially to my friend, I said, I think I was more scared of what they gonna answer. Cause if they answer yes, I'm back
Now
to,
what?
okay, now what I gotta do? Cause my thing, I'm being honest, is 911. I mean, I'm like, and I know now they say, you know, dial another number. But I think that makes me get I'm like, okay, I know I gotta ask it, and I'm praying if I can get ready to ask it, Holy Spirit, help me to let this person know I'm concerned. So I'm gonna show concern by asking them, but then that panic is like, if they say yes, what am I gonna do?
And I think that was my panic on the crisis line, even with training. What do I do when they say yes? Ms. Evelyn also online says yes. It's the answer that makes you uncomfortable, because now what? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add too that one of the things that cause people to be apprehensive was the fact that they thought that if they wasn't thinking about it, then now I've planted that thought into.
Thank you so much for saying that, right? So I usually do include a slide on the myths about suicide. Over these past 10, 15 years, we have come so far in our work in suicide prevention that we hear that less and less, but it still exists. But that's a myth. If I ask if you're having thoughts of suicide, I am not planting a seed. I'm really giving you a gift because my question says, it's okay, we can talk about this. And so it's not, we have all heard people say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. When we talk about asking about suicide, it's the same kind of thing. So we don't just wanna ask the question, we wanna ask the question in a way that signals that you can talk about this with me. So I don't want you to say, you're not talking about doing something stupid like suicide or, right? People say that.
Who say that?
And so that signals, if you're thinking about suicide, I think you're stupid. So we want to just very clearly and directly, are you having thoughts of suicide? Sometimes people might be trying to feel you out, and no means not yet, I'm not ready to tell you yet. And so we have to stay patient and persistent because we'll look at risk factors. Sometimes we don't know how we know, but we just know. Call it discernment, call it the Holy Spirit, call it what you will, but sometimes we know what we know. And so if I ask you the question and you say no, I'm going to take that, I'm taking you at your word, but I'm still gonna check in on what I'm feeling. So maybe I'm gonna ask you again tomorrow. And maybe when I ask you tomorrow, I say, sometimes when people have these things going on, they might think this, right? Normalizing that for them, normalizing that they're having those thoughts until we get to the place where they trust us enough to be able to say, yep, I am having thoughts. Let me speak to the, they said yes. Now, what in the world do I do? So our concern is always imminent safety. Safety right in this moment. And so my person has acknowledged they're having thoughts of suicide, but they're still engaged with me, right? So there's still time to keep them safe because they're here. Now, if I'm engaged with somebody, and they're having thoughts of suicide and they got the gun in their hand, call 911 immediately, because that's an imminent risk kind of situation. If in that moment, and we'll get there, they're just having thoughts, they don't have access to means, they don't have a plan, they don't have active intent, they're just having thoughts. Okay, let's talk about it. Because what I learned on the crisis line was, yes to that question, that's not a panic. It's, okay, tell me what's happening that you'd rather be dead. That was always my follow-up question. What's happening in your life right now that you'd rather die? Because I gotta hear their story. I can't go into instant problem solving mode unless I absolutely have to. They're in pain. And like that pressure cooker, part of how we release that pain is for them being able to get it off of them. And so when I say, why would you rather be dead? Man, I just gave them a gift that they probably haven't been given a really long time just to tell their story. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna ask you, why would you not, why do you want to kill yourself? James?
Yeah, and even with that, so the question was, why wouldn't we ask, why do you want to, but yes, we want to ask, why would you rather be dead? I don't want to say, why in the world would you want to do that? Right? I don't want to say that. I don't wanna say, well, you've got so much to live for. 'Cause maybe they don't. That's not for me to say. They might not. What about your kids? They might hate their kids that day,
Mercy.
right? I'm being for real. We gonna fix it. We gonna name all of the stuff that we think is gonna keep them here. And all of those things might be burdens. So our job really is just to listen. And I know that's hard when you got somebody in front of you or on the phone that's saying, I'm thinking about killing us, right? So ask the question. As we ask the question, we do want to make sure we're establishing rapport. So unconditional positive regard. So I can't again react like, oh no, you don't want to do that, right? That does not show unconditional positive regard. These are all of the other things you see on the screen that can help us to establish rapport. Open-ended questions, being very attentive, right? Being genuine. And in that being genuine, it's okay to say, I'm not sure what to do, but I want to be here with you to help you, right? So that's being genuine and real. I'm not sure what to do. So here's some things people always, how do I know somebody's having thoughts of suicide? These are the typical things: talking about suicide, having a plan, self-harming behavior, lots of losses. So these kinds of things might give an indication that something's going on. If these are people that you are close to, if you notice something change in them, that can be a warning indicator. If there is someone who you're close to who has been really, really down and depressed, and all of a sudden they are super cheerful, they are super joyful, that could be a warning indicator that I've made a decision, and I'm gonna kill myself, and they're elated about it. So if you notice those kinds of changes, those could be warning indicators. Please.
We went to a workshop at Spax Street. We were down in Springfield, Missouri, and it was on TV on all the stations when that little 10-year-old boy, he committed suicide. And they had his parents and stuff talking to 500, and I think it's like 569 of us. And then when the mother got up there, she said, me and my husband, we didn't see any change in our 10-year-old. She said he regularly went to school, said when he came home, he got his homework done. She said we talked to him, and she said, when we realized that he had went in the garage and killed himself, she said they didn't see any, she said, red flags. And she said, come to find out, when she did, realize what was happening, he came home and he never said anything to his parents, but he was being bullied at school. But he kept that same, like I said, she said his personality didn't change and his sleep habits didn't change. And she said, before they knew it, she said it wasn't until the moment that he committed suicide. I guess he left a note. And she said, we had no idea he was even having bullying at school. She said he was only 10, and she had pictures of him and stuff. And I mean, she had before pictures, and she had a picture of him the day before he killed himself. And I was like, that's the happiest looking kid. And I know you mentioned that, but I mean, how would a parent know that if you don't, you don't see any change in your child?
And so the question on the floor is, the example of the little boy, 10 years old, died by suicide, but the parents didn't see any signs of it. The harsh reality is that there are instances where you don't know, you don't see, but in terms of parenting, and I don't want to say this to say that the parents weren't doing what they needed to be doing, but it's in this day and age, the level of connectedness you have to have with what's happening with your kiddos. So I may not rely solely on what my 10-year-old is telling me. I want to talk to teachers, hey, how's he doing? Who are his friends? What's the extracurricular, right? And even doing all of that, you still could potentially miss it, right? And that's the heartbreaking part. But it's paying attention to all of those protective factors. We're gonna talk protective factors, paying attention to the risk factors, as we know. Please.
The student died of suicide. And for so long, I've been not being able to see. Because she's the person that they need up. I didn't know. I gave some change to go, what I had in sixth grade, seventh grade, for the teacher. But I find myself just not being able to.
And that is so hard. So the comment on the floor is about a student who was lost by suicide and the teacher blaming herself. I think in my work as a crisis intervention clinician, and even in my work in private practice, I've had to reach that point of peace that I've done the things I know to do. We do the best we can with the information we have. And when we can do it all exactly right, and people still die by suicide. In all of those years on the phones, I had one case that the gentleman called and said that he was going to suicide. He had bought like a machine, like a carbon dioxide type machine, and that he just didn't want to die alone. And so I'm doing all of the things I can to try to find him. People would call us and wouldn't give names, wouldn't give we had certain things we could do to try to track him down, do a safety check. And so we kept him talking, we couldn't find him. I stayed on the line, and at some point, he just stopped talking, line went quiet. I don't know if he died by suicide, right? It could have been an awful prank. But I had to find some peace that I did what I could do, right? So that's a hard thing to have to wrestle with. But I think that's the space to kind of, did I do the thing that I could have? And even if I didn't, then okay, I can shift for the next time, right? We won't catch it every time. Mr. Peter.
Yeah, because it's about a thing like choose to die by suicide, not always about the person at all.
Yes.
This behaviors, all kinds of stuff. And then one thing I like to remind you don't have to. You really don't. You don't really have any ability to kill.
Absolutely.
That person's life is a wild thing. That's it. So he can do, or some people say, shoot you, I've heard of people get shot in the head, they still live and tell about it, they clear mind, et cetera, et cetera. So the thing is that yes, you could have said, but at some point you have to remind yourself, I don't have that ability. You can do it, as she said, all these things she's saying. And yet, not, and then on the flip side, you can just simply say to somebody as they're walking there, good afternoon, you look like such a pleasant person. That thing to keep that person alive.
That's 100%.
So
Yeah.
we don't have that right. We ought to blame ourselves
Yeah.
and to, we feel bad, you feel, you examine yourself and see that you actually, at the least that you're not going to say, you don't have to do it. You could do that.
Ms. Evelyn said if you have a relationship with the person, they know you're going to do everything in your power to stop them from the attempt. That's what makes it difficult when it happens, right? Because we sometimes, why didn't they tell me? Why couldn't I, right? And the comment on the floor from Mr. Peter was that we just don't have that power. But sometimes it's just that, hey, how you doing? That changes the tide. I'm gonna share this quick story and then I wanna make sure we can get to self-care. There's a young man named Kevin Hines. You may have heard his story. So he jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge and lived to tell the story. But as when you hear him tell his story, he talks about how that particular day he suffers with a bipolar diagnosis. He talked about how he had made it up in his mind that that day he was going to kill himself. And so he is in visible despair. And he said that if someone asks me what's wrong or how are you, then I won't do it. So he takes the bus to get to the bridge. He said he's on the bus, again, visibly crying. And someone on the bus kind of looks at him and like, what's with this guy? That kind of response. He gets to the bridge and he believes that there's a lady. She comes to him and he thinks, okay, she's gonna ask me. He's still visibly in despair. She's a tourist. She asked him to take her picture. And so he took her picture down the bridge, jumped. Right? And so sometimes our kind word helps to turn that tide.
Yes.
I have a young lady I've been working with for about 3 or 4 years now, and she is chronically suicidal. Lots of self-injurious behavior, lots of attempts, and she cut off contact with me some months ago. And so I don't know if she's living or alive. And I always said to her, if you suicide, can you please do something to make sure that I can know? And so I just believe she will honor that. So for me, no one's called me, so she's alive. But I don't know.
Yes.
And if she suicides, I will be devastated. And I'm going to take some time and take care of myself. And then I'm gonna get back to the word, right? When I'm okay, right? So, risk factor considerations, again, thinking about what could put a person at risk. I'm gonna go through a couple of these pretty quickly. But here are the things we wanna ask. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Have you had these thoughts in the last couple of months? And have you ever attempted to kill yourself? Because that gives us an idea of what is the risk. If I'm not thinking about killing myself now, but I've been thinking about it within the last couple of months, that's still pretty recent. If I've attempted to do it in the past, that takes that edge off, so to speak. And this is not to minimize it, but it's like riding a roller coaster. So you're in line to get on that roller coaster. You're nervous. You're scared. You hear the other people screaming, but you get on it and you ride it, and you think, oh, okay, I can do it again. Well, sometimes that's how a suicide attempt functions. I did it that first time. It was scary. It was painful. Whatever it was, I didn't like going to the hospital, but I did it that one time, and so it takes that kind of edge off. And so if I attempted before, chances are I could potentially attempt again. So that's why we want to ask these kinds of questions. Intent, right? Are you intending on doing this right now? Or when do you intend on doing this? Do you have a plan? Do you have access to whatever that plan is? The notion of imminent risk. And imminent risk means if I don't do something right at this moment, this person could die. Most often it's usually I need to do something to make sure they stay safe, but chances are they're not in this moment death situation. If they are, call 911. And we always want to think about the underlying risk factors. I'm gonna go past these. All right, a suicide safety plan are the things in terms of safety planning. A safety plan really is just a list of strategies. This is what we're gonna do to keep you safe. And so we're gonna eliminate the pills. Somebody's gonna take your medication, and sometimes it's medication that they need. So I'm just gonna give you a week's worth, because you can't overdose on that. Or we're gonna make sure that the gun is locked up. That's a whole soapbox for me. The easy access to guns, we gotta knock that off. So we find out what their plan is and try to neutralize that as best as we can. But we're not just including that, we're including who are your sources of support, who can you call to talk to if you're feeling down. Are you connected to services? Let's get you connected to service. What are your coping strategies? What are the things that you can do to help yourself stay safe? This can be verbal or written, but it should be collaborative. This should not be me saying, this is what we're going to do. It's, okay, what can we do together to keep you safe? Because if they help develop the plan, chances are they will follow. I'll let you get a picture of that. Protective factors. So if we approach this from a strength-based point, we're looking at, okay, what are the protective factors that exist? Do you have connection to that adult in your life that lets you know that you matter? What are your social contacts? What's the home environment like? All of those things play into the person's risk or their ability to stay safe. These are the steps that you want to take in safety planning. Identifying what those triggers are, what causes them to not feel safe, what are their coping strategies, social contacts and distractions, who are their family and friends. And the family and friends piece is important because they've got some family members and friends who are really good to help keep them safe, and they have some that are not so. So they've got to be able to identify, yeah, let me spend much more time with this cousin versus this one. Making those professional and agency contact, securing their needs, disabling the plan, safe or no drug or alcohol use. And while we say safe drug or alcohol use, there are some instances where people might be addicted or overusing alcohol, and it's not safe for them to just completely stop. That could create a medical challenge and even death. Make sure we agree on the plan and get the person you're working with to say out of their own mouths, yeah, I believe I can follow this plan, and yes, I can stay safe. If at any time they can't, they can always call 988. 988 has been in place for about a little over a year now. And when you dial 988, it routes you to your local crisis line. So this will get you to BHR. And they do have access to mobile counselors who can come out and do a face-to-face assessment and help get connected to services. Any questions about any of that? And then I'm gonna talk about self-care, and then I think there's just more time for questions. Okay, let's talk self-care. So self-care, any intentional actions you take to care for your physical, your mental, your emotional health. So self-care is not selfish. It is actually one of the most ethical things you can do for the people you're responsible for, be it students or family members or church members. Self-care helps you to show up as your best self. And so we want to make sure that we are engaged in all types of good self-care. And this is bigger than just massages and shopping and vacations. It's that too, but it's baseline stuff like eat 3 times a day, drink your water, stop stop eating at Popeyes. I ain't mad at Popeyes, but y'all ain't getting no nutrients at Popeyes. Go to your doctor's appointments. Take your lunch away from your desk. Go for a walk. Clean out your purse. Clean out your car. Those are all examples of good self-care. Spend some time with that friend that feeds you and not that friend that drains you. And so those are just some baseline things. And again, like we started, I said, you know, I can't ask you what you're doing without sharing what I do. These are all the things that I do for good self-care. I'm a big journaler. And I recently started a new practice called junk journaling. And so it's kind of a combination between scrapbooking and journaling. And it just has been really, really amazing. I've loved it. I see a therapist. I tell all of my clients, if it's good for you, it's good for me. So I see a therapist about once a month because life gets heavy. And just like we go to the dentist periodically, we brushing our teeth every day, we're doing the things, but we go to the dentist for good oral hygiene. I go see my therapist for good mental hygiene. Doesn't mean anything's wrong, just means I need a checkup. I nap as much as possible. I love naps. That's what I do for self-care. I mentioned I'm an intercessor. I pray as often as I can. I put my phone on do not disturb because we are so connected. Everybody has instant access. My mama will sometimes call and say, well, I called you. You didn't answer because I wasn't available. I know you my mama, but dog, I got to be offline sometimes. And in particular, the work that I do in the church, I am constantly on. And so I set good boundaries. And I'm a marathon runner. I run because that is, that's where I can hear God. All of the other noise gets shut out and I hear his voice. So those are the things that I do for self-care. I'm encouraging you all, if you do not have a good self-care plan in place, please get one. Because it's a part of your, in my church language, it's part of your stewardship. Right? That's good stewardship. And so this is how you can reach me. If you have questions or anything, Rev Angela at westsidembc.org. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I have a question.
You talked about your self-care. Now, do you find yourself, and I'm speaking of me, my thing is the lawnmower. And you know winter's coming. I said, but when I'm out there cutting my grass, and I often tell them, I said, I be singing these church songs, I done added all kinds of verses, because I don't remember the whole song, so I just keep. But I noticed that as the winter comes down, I'm like, okay, I gotta find, even though I do go to water therapy, but my thing is when I'm with that lawnmower, I'm at peace with myself, I'm communicating with God, and now I'm like, okay, the winter's coming, so ain't gonna be no lawnmower, and I know I ain't going out to shoveling no snow, but so, you know, so I gotta find something else that's gonna replace that, cause like I said, I brought a new lawnmower about a year, or maybe 2 years ago, and it's so peaceful when I'm out there, and I just love it, and I'm like, oh, winter's coming, then they're gonna be cutting no grass, so what am I gonna replace it with?
And so question on the floor is about when we have seasonal coping skills. You need a treasure trove of coping skills because there are gonna be times when your go-to is not available. There have been times that I was injured and I couldn't run. So I had to find something different. I've been thinking about winter is coming. Somebody asked me this morning, you running, what do you do when it's winter weather? You suit up. You get a heavier coat, because I run through the winter. But there will be days that it's snow outside and I can't. So I got a walking pad. And so today I'm just gonna walk indoors, right? So but you do have to have more than one, cause sometimes that one just ain't cutting, right? Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to say this is what
Bless you.
very engaged. Format.
Bless you. Thank you. If there are questions online, you can put them in the chat and I'll be able to see them. It is my absolute privilege to be able to be here with you all.
Thank you.
Any chance I get to talk suicide in the church or any of those kinds of things, I'm going to jump at that opportunity. Yes, please.
Are there some free resources for alcohol addiction, drug addiction?
If you, so call 988. And so 988 is more than just for suicide. So call 988 and let the counselor who answers know that you're looking for low to no cost resources for alcohol substance use, and they can be a few resources. So any mental health related needs, call 988, not just suicide.
I'm not trying to run here parade, but when you mentioned 988, I was just wondering if it'd be okay to give these.
Please, absolutely.
Yes, you know, we had a whole bunch of these, I'm looking for these at home, so, yes, yes, right.
The whole thing.
Oh, he already has them.
All right, thank you all again. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you very much, Pastor Ted. That was beautiful, excellent. Really, really great. It's so easy for us to just overlook those who are in pain around us. And as you guys have heard, it's possible to not know that others are around us are in pain. So we have to really be diligent and don't take anybody for granted. People start talking about suicide, you know, joking about it, that could easily be their way of saying, this is something I'm interested in. But also I wanted to ask if Pastor Fields want to come up and close us out with prayer. And I want to thank each person for coming. I just want to God's name for you, and I hope next year. I've had the privilege of being online with Patsy when a person called in and said they were going to die by suicide. And I think I've showed most of y'all spoken about this before. And we talked to him and we got the information from him. And, you know, sometimes people decide to die by suicide. They are going into a trance and, you know, so you want to stop that. So I said, well, praise the Lord. Yeah, he was shocked. Literally shocked that I said that. You know, I went on with a ridiculous type of talk. I could do that because there is further training that I have. There's more background to it. Even as we talk to him, I'm constantly assessing, trying to see, is this a real threat or is this not a real threat?
And one thing I liked about that is that none of us got off the line and that you continue and you stayed on while somebody called where he was called, I think he was in Nebraska.
It was in
And
Nebraska.
they, until somebody came there and she said, I'm not gonna get off. And those, like I said, those of us that stayed on, she said, until I hear them knocking at your door, they came in. And I said, she was not going to let him go until she knew that somebody was there.
Well, all of us stayed on that line, right? And it wasn't just me who spoke to him. I spoke and then someone else had something to say. And there were people who lived in Nebraska who said, I'm gonna go over there. I wouldn't necessarily encourage people to go because we don't know at what point they decide they're gonna be homicide first and then suicide. So we try to, you know, like she said, you assess that situation. But yes, Patsy stayed on with me and we hung in there. I don't know if it was an hour, 2 hours, or how long it was, but we heard the police say, we're here. And then they took him to the hospital, and then we heard that no, he was not, they assessed him there, and, then they sent him on back then. So, you know, my assessment was correct, he was not, in danger, she said, but that's something that, you know, that was me doing, having a background, kind of being trained for you, just to outline, you don't have to do all that overthinking and worrying and all that stuff, you don't have to do that. But anyway, Pastor, I don't know why you sit down. So I would really like you to come up and bless us out, and I just thank you, I thank you so much. Pastor Tate, thank you, I really appreciate it, the workshop. And all of you for coming, thank you, and I really hope, by the grace of God, that you won't have to, but you will be empowered, you'll feel stronger, and in the case that someone in your sphere, someone you know, may choose to die by suicide, that yes, you will feel sad, yes, you may feel some guilt, but also if you need to go on and get some help for yourself too, because that's a serious, serious situation. And then I want you to be determined to live better, live your life to the fullest. Did you want something?
No, you're not hurt yourself.
Oh, I'm not gonna hurt me, okay? I'm just kidding. Yeah, you're not. Okay.
Big brother, no.
Let's bow our heads for prayer. Loving Father, our God, again, we're so thankful, blessed, honored, and privileged to be able to come to this platform to discuss suicide. We know that this is a real issue in our society. And we pray, oh God, that as we have learned here, that we will take this message and share it and use it accordingly. Thank you for our online guests that have joined in, and we thank you for our presenter. Now, as we depart from this place, we ask you to continue to cover and keep, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Bye, you guys. Thanks for coming out. And we'll see you next year. Next year, we're going to tackle mass shootings. We want to prevent mass shootings. Yes, that.